The word defenestrate sounds almost whimsical until you remember it means to throw someone out of a window. Anywhere with glass and gravity could see such a fate. But Prague, the fairy tale city of spires, seems uniquely tied to this deadly tradition. Over centuries, windows in this city have been portals, not just to the streets below, but to revolutions, wars, and mysteries that changed the course of European history. The First Plunge, 1419. Our story begins in the early 15th century. Picture Bohemia, then a jewel of the Holy Roman Empire, but a kingdom seething with religious discord. Decades before Martin Luther ever nailed his thesis to a church door, a Czech theologian named Jan Hus was already challenging the might of Rome. He condemned the sale of indulgences, those costly certificates that promised forgiveness of sins and a shorter stay in purgatory. He insisted the Bible should be read in Czech, not cloistered away in Latin. And he demanded that the clergy reform itself, stripping away the corruption and wealth that alienated ordinary believers. These teachings spread like wildfire among a Czech population hungry for change. But to the church authorities, Hus was a dangerous spark. In 1411, he was excommunicated. When he was lured to the Council of Constance in 1414, promised safe passage to defend his views, he instead found himself in chains. He was declared a heretic, and in 1415, burned alive. His death did not snuff out his ideas. It turned him into a martyr. His followers, known as the Hussites, seethed as tensions escalated in a kingdom already fractured by competing popes and papal politics. By July 1419, Prague was a tinderbox. On the 30th of that month, Husite priest Jan Jelevsky led a furious crowd to Prague's new town hall. Their demand? The release of imprisoned comrades. What happened next depends on which chronicler you believe. Maybe stones were thrown from the windows, maybe insults provoked the crowd. Either way, something snapped. The mob surged into the hall. Moments later, Prague's burgomaster, a judge, and several council members were seized and hurled from the upper windows onto the cobblestones below. Most died on impact. Survivors were beaten to death by the mob waiting outside. This was no isolated act of violence. This was the spark that ignited the Husite Wars, a brutal conflict that raged across Bohemia for 17 years, reshaping the religious and political landscape of Central Europe. The Forgotten Fall, 1483. Fast forward 6 decades, the Husite Wars had ended, and a fragile peace emerged between the moderate Hussites, called Utraquists, after their belief in communion under both kinds, and the Catholic nobility. On paper, it was a partnership. In reality, mistrust festered. Catholics whispered about heresy. Hussites feared purges. In September of 1483, rumors swirled that the Catholic leadership planned to strike first, cleansing Hussites from positions of influence. The Utraquists decided to act preemptively. On the night of September 24th, mobs stormed the old and new town halls. History repeated itself. Councilors were seized and flung from the windows into the dark. By dawn, the Hussites controlled Prague. Their coup successful. Unlike the first defenestration, this one didn't trigger a war. Negotiations followed and an uneasy balance returned. But because it lacked the fiery aftermath of its predecessor, this episode often slips through the cracks of history, an overlooked rehearsal for future turmoil. The Fall heard across Europe, 1618. Now, we come to the most famous defenestration of them all, the one that sent shockwaves through an entire continent. By the early 17th century, Europe was still reeling from the Protestant Reformation. The Kingdom of Bohemia had achieved a kind of religious détente. Protestants and Catholics shared power, their rights secured by the Letter of Majesty issued in 1609. Then came Ferdinand II, a staunch Catholic who ascended the Bohemian throne in 1617. Ferdinand ignored the Letter of Majesty. Protestant churches were shuttered. Rights were stripped away. It was tinderbox time again. On May 23, 1618, Protestant nobles marched to Hradčany Castle to confront two royal governors, Jaroslav Borita of Martinez and Vilém Slavata. Their secretary, Philip Fabricius, was also present. The nobles demanded answers about their violated celebrated freedoms, tempers flared. And then, as if scripted by fate itself, history repeated its grim choreography. Martinez was seized, dragged to a window, and tossed headlong into the void. Slavata followed, clawing desperately at the frame until his hand was struck loose. Fabricius, guilty of only being there, was hurled out next. 3 men plummeted from a dizzying height and somehow lived. Protestants claimed they landed in a manure pile. Catholics insisted angels broke their fall. Whatever the truth, they survived. Fabricius even earned the ironic title von Hohenfall, meaning of the high fall. But the survival of those men didn't prevent catastrophe. This act ignited the Bohemian Revolt, which spiraled into the 30 Years' War, one of the most destructive conflicts in European history. Armies ravaged the continent, entire regions were depopulated. In terms of sheer percentage of lives lost, it remains the deadliest war in German history. The war finally ended in 1648 with the Treaty of Westphalia. This treaty didn't just bring peace, it redrew borders and cemented the concept of the sovereign nation-state, the framework that still shapes global politics today. The Last Shadowed Fall, 1948. For centuries, Prague's windows seemed to whisper of faith and power, but in the 20th century, they became entwined with ideology and espionage. On the morning of March 10, 1948, the body of Jan Masaryk, the foreign minister of Czechoslovakia, was found beneath the window of the foreign ministry. Just weeks earlier, President Edvard Beneš had urged him to remain in office. Despite a communist takeover of the government, Masaryk agreed. The official story claimed suicide, or perhaps an accident, but few believed it. Even under the heavy curtain of Soviet influence, whispers of foul play persisted. After the communist regime collapsed, new investigations followed in 2004, 2019, and 2025. Each dug deeper into that night. Masaryk's valet recounted seeing 3 men arrive late in the evening. Through the door, he heard Masaryk's voice. "I will not do this for you. I will sign everything, but not this. I will do everything. But this can happen only over my dead body." Shouting continued for an hour. At 11:45 p.m., the valet was dismissed, the last person known to see Masaryk alive. Who were those men? What did they demand? We may never know. But today, most historians agree, Masaryk did not jump. He was pushed. Stroll through Prague today and you'll be enchanted by its Gothic churches, its pastel Baroque facades, its skyline bristling with spires. You'd never guess how many windows here have witnessed history's turning points. But as the cobblestones whisper their secrets, one lesson lingers. Prague's windows are much more than just architectural features. They're thresholds where power, faith, and politics have collided, sometimes violently, leaving ripples that still shape our world. So by all means, enjoy the view. Just keep a safe distance from the edge.